jobs could be cut and first feared. Well, let's talk more about some of those stories. I'm joined by political consultant Ollie Kendall. Very good to see you.
Hello.
And you've picked the non-doms who are keeping the cash as the starting point for our discussion.
Yeah, I mean, we're slightly in the dark about this. The Independent goes to its headline, "A Matter of Honour, clamour grows for non-dom peers to give up their titles," and we've got these 5 pictures of peers in their ermine looking very austere. We don't know quite where the clamour is coming from, but the assumption has to be that there are rumbles in Westminster that finally, after so many years, all of these peers who are non-domiciled, not paying tax in the UK, not based in the UK, and yet they can vote in Westminster. They have some of the most powerful people in this country, and they can donate to political parties, will finally come under the aegis of this reform that's happening in Parliament. Now, this is obviously in the interest of the coalition. Nick Clegg is very much taking a front seat in driving that reform through. We know that reform of the upper house, in terms of voting reform, in terms of will we get rid of these non-elected peers and have elected members of the households, will take a long time. So from a political perspective, in the short term, it makes a lot of sense to try and get some quick hits for the coalition, and we know they're having a bit of a tough time at the moment. So one would assume that we're going to see perhaps these non-doms not allowed to take their seats in Westminster, which would be a kind of a precursor to the reform we'll see probably in a year and a half brought through by the coalition.
I mean, certainly the Daily Mail today was saying, how on earth can they keep their titles? So it's, if they decide to keep the money, as it were, keep their tax benefits, they can't sit in Westminster, is my understanding, but they can keep their titles. So they'd still be, you know, Baron Foster, Baron Bagri, Lord McAlpine, etc.
I mean, I think that's a trade-off most of us would accept. You can keep the name Lord, but as long as you can't...
Well, why should they keep their name Lord? That is the clamour, according to some.
I mean, to be honest with you, me personally,
you don't care?
I don't care so much. As long as the people who are representing us in our great House of Parliament are voted and they're elected by the people, it doesn't matter if there's I mean, we at the moment have a number of people who are earls and barons and lords who don't vote in the House, who can't sit in the House, but they have these titles, and fine, you know what, they can swan around their country estates and have the titles all they like. The point is here that we've had a wretched year and a half in Westminster. We've had the expenses scandal, which has just dominated everything, and there is a perception out there in the country that this is a rotten place, and it is incumbent upon the coalition, who've got no money anyway, to say, okay, you know, what can we do? We can reform from within.
Yeah, but the point being that does seem like a lot of navel-gazing, you know, the focus on a political reform, the focus on the upper house and so on, where most people in the country would like the economy to be the only focus, probably. I
don't think it's beyond the wit of our politicians to say we're going to focus on the economy and focus on political reform. I hope it's not beyond their wit anyway.
Moving on to The Telegraph, what's the story you've picked here?
The story here is the story that Steve Webb, the Lib Dem minister at DWP, has announced that private sector pensions are likely to come within the remit of, well, they're not going to index them any longer to the retail price index, they're going to index them to the consumer price index.
Which is lower, is that right?
Which is lower. Now that's good and bad, yin and yang. The good is, it means that these final sector, pension and salary schemes, which are struggling at the moment to keep going, will probably be given a lifeline, because the cost to the providers, to the employers, will be less, and therefore more people can sign up to them, therefore they'll be able to pay out. Good news. Bad news is, it means of course the indexing is going to result in less of a pension pot for the people who are going to be retiring. So the pensions will go down. And I think over the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks of this coalition, pensioners have been pretty hard done by. We've seen the VAT increase, which is a regressive tax, which will clearly disproportionately benefit people on lower incomes, pensioners. And we've seen the income tax threshold, which will go up for many people on low incomes, pensioners not included. And I think pensioners will quite rightly feel fairly hard done by. And I'm sure there'll be clamours from pension representative groups that this is unfair. But let's remember, budget 3 weeks ago, government said public sector pensions will be tracked to the consumer price index, as will benefits. So it's really bringing occupational pensions in line with public sector pensions, and it seems, in a time of austerity, a relatively fair measure, I suppose.
And as we know, pensions, the big explosive issue both in the public and the private sector. Yeah. Now then, on to The Guardian. The picture there of Raoul Moat released today. The CCTV images released today by the police.
I suspect this picture will be on the front pages of most newspapers. 6th day, fugitive still at large. It does seem extraordinary that the wit and wisdom of the police, not just from Northumberland but from the Met and elsewhere, still unable to capture this chap in a relatively small, confined geographical space. At the moment, clearly the hunt is on for Mr. Moat, but I wonder at what point the focus in the media, if he continues to evade capture, will start to focus on police criticism. And at the moment, we've seen the police calming people locally, making sure that there isn't this sort of public fear and panic, which you sort of sense is bubbling. But it is extraordinary that one man against what seems like the world for 6 and going to a 7th day is still at loose and at large.
You wonder if they gave up looking, they might find him just as quickly sometimes, don't you?
One
But
does
anyway,
wonder. He's
we
quite
will
distinctive.
See.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Financial Times, the spy story.
Yeah, who needs John le Carré? It does appear that the spy story is nearing its end. We've had the spies in US courts today admitting to not to espionage but to a lower charge, and that seems to be the precursor to allowing this spy exchange, very Cold War-esque, isn't it? All this with the Russian spy or the US spies who are based in Russia, and also I think a British spy. So it does seem that diplomatic back channels are currently open. These guys have now and girls have conceded to this lower charge of espionage, and I suspect in the next 24, 48 hours we'll find there is an exchange, and this rather sort of wonderful story that takes us back a couple of decades will be over.
Yeah, a lot of people won't remember the couple of decades ago, sadly, but we do by the sound of it. On to the Daily Express, just very quickly, the heat danger warning.
Yeah, we remember a few years ago, there of course was big heat waves in the UK 2003. A lot of old people died. Again, we're being told now, big danger warning. I think the Department for Health is saying that we've got to take preparations, particularly for old people. Of course, we're normally used to sort of it being in winter when the problems happen, and we've got the winter fuel payments to keep people warm. In fact, we all know the heat's been terrible, and it's causing problems for old people.
And getting hotter this weekend as well, I think. Ollie, thank you very much indeed. We will see Ollie a little bit later on for our full press preview at 11:30. And also joining us tonight will be the Mirror's crime correspondent,